Rising Star Games is on a roll. After releasing Cave's Akai Katana to the Xbox 360 earlier this year, and bravely at retail no less, they're back for round 2. This time with an HD update to G-Rev's 2005 Naomi Arcade and Dreamcast outing, Under Defeat.
Being a PSN release makes this game pretty widely available, but a physical copy of the North American version is also available, albeit exclusively from Amazon.com. So while you won't find this one in stores anytime soon, you can still have a copy to adorn your shelves, and it even comes with a soundtrack CD. Huh, that's interesting. I can't think of another North American shooting game more worthy of a soundtrack CD, art book, and maybe a small figure or model. Maybe next time.
Under Defeat is a game that stands out for quite a few different reasons, so let's get straight into it.
The Empire has been thwarted by the Union, and now it's time to push back. Using your experimental helicopter gunships, it's your 5-stage mission to destroy the Union's superweapons and return the Empire to glory. Under Defeat sure does take an up-close and personal approach when it comes to the gameplay. Rather than a pulled-out viewpoint that shows more enemies on a screen with smaller-sized ships relative to the playfield, everything is huge and in your face. Claustrophobic even. Getting used to the fire from enemy anti-air and helicopters will take a bit of getting used to, especially since, by default, the direction of your fire hinges on your movement. But once you get used to it, it becomes fairly easy to navigate the hail of bullets that fly everywhere, almost constantly. Thankfully, for the size of everything on screen, your hitbox is actually pretty tiny. Bullets are harmless as they pass over your ship, unless they hit where your rotor attaches to the helicopter. At that point, you're dead.
As you move, your helicopter will point in the direction you travel. When you fire, it will maintain the same angle of fire until you release the shot button regardless of how you move. This is a handy maneuver, since it's very difficult to attack many of the rapid-firing foes straight on. In addition to this, a player also has access to limited options, which can be summoned after charging the option gauge when not firing. These options can be changed depending on what pickups you have obtained. The Vulcan is default and charges the fastest, but is the weakest overall. The cannon is slower firing, and the slowest charging rockets are a one-shot deal but wicked powerful. And of course, there's the mandatory screen-clearing bomb attack.
Since Under Defeat was originally released in arcades and subsequently to the Dreamcast, the actual control of the game, well, suffers a bit. In Under Defeat HD, things have gotten vastly better with the addition of dual-stick control. Much like a standard twin-stick shooter, your shot direction and movement can be controlled independently of each other, though the angle of gunfire is restricted compared to traditional twin-stickers like, say, Bang.io HD. On the whole, the game is much more fun to play with the dual-stick control activated.
The game is also presented with a pair of different modes. The original arcade mode is present, with a Tate aspect ratio and everything that you'd find in the original Under Defeat, with the addition of the dual stick option and the ability to use the downloadable extra ships in the main game straight off the bat. But then there is the new Origin mode, with a remixed soundtrack and an enhanced widescreen presentation. In Origin mode, you have a wider, more variable firing range, custom fit for the wider play areas. Origin also has additional enemies in various places, making it a smidge tougher than the original. When you complete the first loop, you can then access the second loop from the main menu, which mirrors the stages horizontally and changes the overall color palette and environmental effects.
There is a bit of a sticky point though. In either mode, there is quite a bit of slowdown, which can hamper, and at times almost cripple, the action. Believe it or not though, it's made even worse with one of the DLC ships, the VLK-602P, since it fires rockets constantly and those rockets cause additional explosions and mayhem. The game will chunk up to a crawl 60% of the time in single player and 90% of the time in 2-player. And that's another thing, no online multiplayer, which is a shame. But when it comes down to it, it might have been a wise move, thanks to the seemingly volatile frame rate.
As with most modern shooters, Under Defeat HD also has an online leaderboard for high score chasers to test their mettle. Scoring high can be achieved in a few ways. First off, you can boost your score by taking out multiple enemies while using your options. With the rocket options, this can lead to a sweet point increase, if used at just the right time.
Next up, you're able to get a tidy 5,000 point bonus by picking up an option you already have. And finally, as is typically the way with most modern shmups, there's an end stage bonus that takes the amount of time left after a boss fight, the percentage of enemies destroyed, and your bomb stock into account. Interestingly enough, there is no extend score, or so it would seem. Even after scoring over 1.5 million points, nothing happened. This could be because of the increased amount of credits as you play the game more, but it would be nice to get an extra life to better accommodate a 1 credit clear.
Presentation-wise, Under Defeat HD has its strong and its weak points. On one hand, the mechanical design is pretty sweet, but they are also very plain looking, with a few exceptions, such as the first mid-boss in Stage 5. Some of the stages have really cool environmental effects, such as snow and reflective pools of water, but on the whole, the stages are all drab and plain looking.
Despite this, there are some neat details, such as your helicopter's downwash moving trees around, and explosions blasting away the smoke from your enemy's fallen comrades. Stuff blows up really nicely in Under Defeat as well, which is no surprise given the incredible visual sheen on the explosions in G-Rev's later Strania. Meanwhile, the Shinji Hosoi soundtrack in the original mode is pretty good stuff on the whole, but the New Order mode's OST by Yosuke Yasui of, get this, Eschatos, is just incredible with a real late 80s Patlabor vibe, especially later in. But as good as the new OST is, and despite the visual solidness, the rest of the game leaves quite a bit to be desired. With the downloadable version in specific, there's literally nothing that indicates any indication to the backstory of the two-player characters. And the whole premise was considered, especially at the time of the original release, to be quite controversial, as there were several allusions was suggested, and described by more than one source, that the Empire you're fighting with was likened to a defeated Nazi Germany, rising up against the Allied Alliance after World War II. I always thought we'd never see a localized version of this game based on these allegations alone, but thankfully Rising Star Games took up the torch.
So, just how does Under Defeat HD stack up? Let's take a look.
The dual-stick controls save the day and trump the originals, but slowdown can really hamper the smoothness of the gameplay, especially in two-player games.
The control is difficult to get used to, and it requires a lot of practice.
With a bit of practice, a 1cc is a very real possibility. Online leaderboards add a competitive layer to the game.
The slowdown made things more challenging than it should be in a two-player game, but otherwise, the bullet patterns are very manageable.
With 2 loops in both New Order and Arcade, not to mention multiple difficulties and trophy support, there's a lot to play through here.
But while there's a lot to go through, the lack of an ongoing story makes it feel a bit plodding.
The stages are a bit too drab and sparse, but the in-your-face perspective allows for a lot of detail in the models. Cool effects on the smoke in relation to downwash and explosions make the visuals more believable.
A lot of the effects are pretty though, and some of the mechanical designs are pretty fresh.
Shinji Hosoi's original OST is good, but Yosuke Yasui's New Order OST is wicked.
The soundtrack is pretty catchy, but some of the sound effects didn't quite work out so well.
The idea surrounding the ship's fire in relation to the movement of the 2005 original version is nothing new. It was featured similarly in 1996's Sonic Wings Special, but the newly added dual-stick setup makes it shine. The option system makes for a fresh gameplay experience as well.
I felt that the core mechanics were less than accommodating, although the dual-stick setup feels pretty natural.
In the end, Under Defeat HD is a fun gameplay experience, especially when the dual-stick control is enabled, even if the presentation falls a bit flat. In the end, Under Defeat HD gets a 3.5 out of 5. If you want a copy of Under Defeat HD, you can snag it straight off of the PSN store for $29.99. It's also the only PS3 shmup to see a physical North American release, for the same price as the PSN download, although you will only find it exclusively on Amazon. You can also get Under Defeat HD on Xbox 360 in Europe, though it is region coded. For $30 you can do a lot worse, especially since the physical copy has that awesome Yosuke Yasui soundtrack included at no extra cost.